At first, I thought it was a small tremor, but when it started to shake a lot more, I was desperate. I didn't know what to do. You couldn't run or hold on.
The day of the earthquake, almost all of us were home. When the shaking started, everything started falling apart. The wall in the back of my house fell.
A massive earthquake in the South American country of Ecuador. 17 News reporter Lori Lizarraga is visiting the country when the quake hits. A year later, she returns, documenting the recovery efforts, the Ecuador earthquake.
The energy released during a 7.8 magnitude quake is equal to the energy of 9.7 million of the atomic bombs dropped on Hiroshima. That's enough energy to power the entire United States for 6 years.
When it's high magnitude earthquakes, you're not going to avoid all damage. Even reinforced buildings under high levels of shaking can suffer damage. It's the degree, the amount of damage that you would expect to see.
For those who remember the Bakersfield earthquake of 1952, it destroyed or damaged some 400 buildings. Bakersfield's iconic Beale Memorial Clock Tower at the intersection of 17th and Chester among them. And that was a magnitude 5.5. The most striking thing about the day for me was the way the ocean shook, like a cup of water being tipped from side to side. Waves slammed from one side of the ocean to the other, defying gravity. The ground seized, the late afternoon sky turned to night in seconds. Nothing made sense.
It was horrible because it was as if I was on a carousel moving up and down. I began to pray and said, "Lord, if it's my turn to die here, let it be your will."
In the first days, a state of emergency was declared across several provinces, my family's home in one of them. Restaurants, stores, entire towns shut down. And as the dust began to settle, a pungent sense of fear filled the air. And while my family and I were fortunate and safe, so many others weren't.
And the first weeks was like the time of chaos, and thousands of people going to the streets and begging for food and water.
The first thing we saw when we arrived in Puerto Viejo were many families that were emotionally traumatized. People that were disoriented, entire families that were trying to lift the debris in an effort to rescue family members or others that were still buried.
The quake was so strong, it could be felt all the way in the country's capital, Quito, 100 miles away from the epicenter.
It felt like a wave. The house would get picked up and then drop down. When the earthquake began, there were tsunami warnings, and because we live on the coast, we left immediately, still not knowing where to go.
People living on the coast definitely have to be worried about tsunamis. Not every earthquake generates a tsunami, but the possibility is there, and you may not have much time to react to it.
For me, and I think for most people, it was the fear of not knowing what was going to happen next. Another tremor, a larger earthquake. There was a real and penetrating fear of a tsunami for weeks. I didn't know, nobody knew. The stress in the towns was so high, a few times we were told to run up to higher ground, a tsunami was coming. It didn't, but no one knew better. Everyone was just so nervous, panicked that at any given moment something else was coming. And that feeling of helplessness was very desperate.
The devastation of the Ecuador earthquake